Lauren with Me Voices, and today I am joined by Chris Lake with Community for a Cause. Thank you so much for being here, Chris.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. Truly an honor.
Are the Me Too Many Voices and Friends for the Community by the Community series. And one of my favorite parts about this is I'm getting to know what people that I haven't previously chatted with within our community, and you being one. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to chat and learn about work that you're doing. You want to tell us a little bit about Community for a Cause?
Absolutely. Hi. Not sure what happened right there. Booted me, said, "Thanks for joining us. You're all done." I said, "Okay, that's what it is." To answer your question, Community for a Cause is a New York-based charity that aims to protect and provide the vulnerable. I originally started about 5 years ago in October 2014 to help kids with special needs. I'm a special education teacher. I do ABA therapy with kids with autism. And from there, I expanded to several different branches to help other vulnerable populations in New York. And I focus in New York only because I'm from New York and live in New York. So we have multiple branches, including children with special needs, homelessness, environmental protection, storm relief, peace promotion, which equals community building. And then we just opened a sexual violence prevention branch this past February. And in doing so, our target is legislation. We like to we want to cut the head off the dragon, basically. If there are laws that prevent something from happening, we want to create that law or support a law. So when the idea dawned on me to start the branch, I did my research into what New York laws right now regarding sexual violence, prevention, sexual assault are already on the boards that need some more support. And I came across Senator Biaggi's Senate Bill 6679C that, as you stated, would close a loophole for voluntary intoxication. And for those of you who are listening, what that basically means is if someone drinks too much or if they ingest any intoxicating elements too much of their own volition, if they choose, it's their 21st birthday, they're at a party, they want to have a good time, and they get drunk, basically. And while they're drunk, they get sexually assaulted, that case can be thrown out. That does not fall under mentally incapacitated. I guess I don't know what the reasoning is. I don't care. It just doesn't seem right and logical to me because so many sexual assaults happen in specifically those circumstances, and so many sexual predators specifically look for those circumstances. So it stands to reason that the loophole needs to be closed. So I saw that her bill was on the floor. It was introduced, and it's on the floor calendar. That's an important phrase. Keep that phrase in the back of your head, floor calendar. Every Senate bill needs to have an Assembly bill to match. Once both of those pass, then the governor of that state signs it, and then it becomes state law. Just to give a basic civics class to anyone who is not aware. Not to insult anyone's intelligence. I'm a teacher, so that's what I do. So when I looked up the Assembly version of the bill, I realized it is not on the floor calendar, which means that the bills could essentially die in legislation. And it happens to a lot of bills. Someone will introduce a bill, someone else will introduce the alternate side of the bill, and if both don't pass, it goes nowhere. Now, bills typically have a 2-year expiration date, so if they were not to get voted on this year because of COVID-19, end of legislation in New York, which means the moment they're unable to vote anymore is in mid-June. After mid-June, they can't vote on anything until January. And every state has a different end of legislations. For example, Pennsylvania doesn't have an end of legislation, or at least, I believe it goes at least until November. It's a very long period that they can vote on things. Places like Texas, they have a legislative session every other year. So if you miss a window, there's a full year before you can even hope they'll vote on things. And this is all based on when the country was first made. People were farmers, and they basically wrote laws so that when lawmakers were done being politicians, they can go back to the farm. The problem was that was never updated for the reality of the time. And why would they? It's not in the interest. And if no one's forcing their hand, great, I get 30 weeks paid leave. Not too shabby. So our goal is to get this put on the floor calendar sometime before June. And once it's on the floor calendar, then you can vote on it. But first step is that Assembly Bill 8634B is on the floor calendar. The next step is then to make sure that both the Senate version and the Assembly version are voted on and put to and passed. And part of the key in terms of legislation outside of introducing it, we look to have what's called disruptive activism, you could say. Protests are an example of disruptive activism. If you were to protest in a mall basement where no one saw it, that's not very disruptive, it's not effective, you're not creating awareness. But when you have people who are standing in traffic, that's disruptive. It's annoying, people can't go where they need to go, and depending on what season that is, that can force a lot of people's hands. This can be used for good and bad. I'm not advocating that move to anyone who's listening, I'm simply giving examples. So one form of disruptive politics that's quite safe is simply phone calls. People love petitions, people love emails, but they are very easily ignored. No one has to do anything regarding a petition. You can have 1 million Americans sign a petition. That does not force any hand. That does not create any legislation. That does not mean much to someone who simply says, I don't want to. I don't want to. Good for you. You got 1 million people to agree with you. I don't care. Emails do not go directly to senators or assembly members. They go to their aides. Their aides don't have to read all of them. If it's very lengthy, they're not going to read all of them. But phone calls, they can't ignore. If you call their office, that is a physical presence that is going to interrupt their day. I often joke with people that I know, I wish I had a team of 24 people. There's 24 strong people who said, I'm going to make a phone call every single day at this time. And I say 24 because that gives you 4 people an hour for 6 hours that can call every single day. And persistence is the key. It's necessary to say, I'm not just going to call Monday and then try again Tuesday and they kind of blew me off, so whatever. So I'm going to call Monday through Friday at 9:15 every single day until, not just for 1 week, not just for 2 weeks, but until. Typically, the phone call doesn't last more than 2 minutes, at most maybe 5. And they rarely ask much detailed information for you, so you could literally use a team of 24 to accomplish legislation across the country, if one were so inclined. But phone calls are necessary. For the Assembly bill, you basically need to call the person in charge of the Rules Committee, who is Assembly Speaker Carl E. Heastie, so that he can actually promote this bill from where it is to the floor calendar. After that, it's a different story, but that's basically the process in New York. For those of you who are out of New York and other states, learn how the system works. A lot of times, those of us who are vulnerable or those who are championing and advocating a cause for the vulnerable, our hearts are in the right places, but sometimes we don't want to do the homework. And it's not to judge and it's not to be preachy. It's the unfortunate reality. Find out what the fine print is. Ultimately, if the fine print isn't changed, nothing changes. And legislation is the best way to force a hand. If the law says that if a person who is sexually assaulted when they are drinking, whether something has slipped in a drink or they just had too many drinks because it was their birthday, then that's sexual assault. There's no loophole because law has been changed, which also brings you to consent. Right now, as Lauren and I were talking about earlier, and I've been talking with Joyce Short, who's with the Consent Action Network, has championed this cause. She's been on a TED Talk and championed this cause. There is no definition of consent in any state in this country. Not one. Not one. It's 2020. And we have not yet found someone who could write legislation that says consent should be defined as freely given, informed, knowledgeable agreements, or some other codified language. If that's not the language they want to use, there should be a definition. And this came up in both Bill Cosby's case and Harvey Weinstein's case when the jury asked the judge, well, how do you define consent? And the judge turned to them and said, use your common sense. That's insufficient. That's not law. That's not how you have people judge whether someone committed a crime or not. You say, well, the law says consent is freely given, informed, knowledgeable agreement, or what other language a legislator wants to write, but there should be some law in at least one state, if not all of them, by 2020. So again, those of you who are not, yes, I agree, it is insane. It is insane, absolutely insane. It's mind-numbing. But for those of you who feel passionate about that and feel it is insane, look up Joyce Short, look up codify consent, hashtag codify consent, and consider talking to your legislators. Don't be afraid of this. They're people just like you and I. They put their pants on one leg at a time. give them a call, ask to meet with them. It might be a small process, but it's a worthwhile process. I'm just one guy, and I've met with my share of assembly members and senators, and I didn't learn how to do this until 3 years ago. After I wrote a petition that I realized in hindsight wasn't worth anything. I was like, wait a second, I'm writing a petition to Governor Cuomo, but does he write laws? No. And I got people to sign it because people will sign petitions they care about, or they'll click like, or they'll retweet, or they'll what have you. But if a petition isn't going to the lawmaker, then you're making the wrong person aware. And if it's the wrong person, you're wasting their time. If you're wasting their time, they're annoyed. Politicians are very busy, so you want to make sure you target the right person. Look up your legislative representative. And a lot of states you can go on to, like we have nyassembly.gov. You can go there and find out by putting in your zip code who your assembly member is. Look up your assembly member. Look up your district senator. It's not the one that you hear about in the news, because that's usually a federal, that's a national senator. You do not want to reach out to them. You're wasting their time. If I were to reach out to Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and say, hey, I really care about this situation in New York, that's great, I can't vote on that. I vote on national issues. If I were to reach out to Charles Schumer, he's got a big name, people know him, and say, hey, we need your help. I said, that's great, I can't help you. He literally cannot help me. He needs to make sure he can discuss it with other people that he knows, but is that in his interest? Again, your best bet is to target the person who can make a change. If it's in your state, find your state assembly member. If it's in your city, find your city council member. Learn how the system works and find the fine print. Find what you want to change. There are some laws that blow my mind, from, when speaking of sexual violence, from child marriage laws to the fact we don't have a consent laws, to sexual harassment laws, to stalker laws, anything that's affected you and you say this shouldn't be okay, look to see if there's a law about it. There might not be. And laws are very much reactive. They're very reactive. They're not proactive. When the internet was birthed, legislators did not sit down and say, okay, before this gets off the ground, how do we prevent people from stealing people's identity online? Of course not. It happened and they realized this is a bad thing, so we got to make a law about it. But someone had to bring it up. Be that person to bring it up. Be your own advocate. Be annoying. Be persistent. Be consistent. Find a team of people who will work with you. Yeah, and persist. Cheers. I see the comments. I appreciate you. Common sense is influenced by broken cultural norms. That's a beautiful, beautiful statement, and it's true. We walk in the milieu of what's common to our vernacular. We say, okay, this is the culture of the time, so be it. And sometimes people don't want to buck the trend, and sometimes people don't want to have the unpopular opinion. Have an unpopular opinion, but make sure there's facts behind it. Don't simply say things to be contrarian. Don't simply say things to ruffle people's feathers. Say things that have evidence, and then show that evidence, like the fact that there's no law on consent. There's evidence there's no law on consent, and there's evidence that that's a problem. We can get into a whole rabbit hole of other issues, but I don't want to yammer on too much, Lauren. So let me know what other questions you got for me, and I'll go on.
No, this is great and educational. I'll feel free to utilize the chat feature as you are. If you have any questions for either Chris or myself, free to comment, question below. But absolutely, nothing is going to change unless we force them to make the change. It still completely baffles my mind, but until this past year in the state of North Carolina, there was the only state in the United States, but that consent could not be withdrawn. And what do you mean, like, consent can't be withdrawn? Consent can absolutely be withdrawn. But until very recently, North Carolina didn't recognize that as their law. And that's scary. I mean, it's 2020, as you were saying, and you can't ask survivors, why don't you report, until it becomes safer to report. And that's part of codifying consent and changing these laws. The fact that in New York, and probably many other states, that there is a loophole that if you go get drunk, they can say that as a defense. drinking is not a crime. Sexual assault is.
Right.
And the laws need to reflect that. And it's nice to see so many people fired up here and passionate about it here in the live and in the comments. And it's about us rallying and using our voice to be persistent, be annoying, as you said, and make these changes.
Exactly. Be annoying. Don't be afraid to be annoying. It's the way I see it is it's better to be a little annoying than to be very annoyed, right? Because these things are happening and it's going to continue until someone is annoying enough. And that's the case with most laws that you find people pushing back on. There's no shame, and it's not enough to shame people. I find a lot of times, unfortunately, people with a good cause will hope that people in power will be ashamed. It doesn't work. I haven't seen it work in my lifetime. I'm not sure if it's ever worked, but I haven't seen it work. Again, you need to let them know, like, if you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I will force your hand or I will not leave your lawn. And if I can't be on your lawn, I'm going to be on your sidewalk because you don't own the sidewalk. And if I can't be on the sidewalk, I'm going to be in the curb. And just keep being that in their back that makes them say fine, fine. And that's, again, going back to phone calls. When you call about an issue incessantly, and they'll recognize your voice, like, yeah, we know you care about this call. But when you call every day, and a team of people call every day about any issue, whether it's codifying consent, whether it's closing loopholes in sexual assault, whether it's another cause that you have in your heart, as long as you persist in that, it's tying up their lines. That is very disruptive to them, and that forces their hand because they don't want to have their phone ring off the hook all day, every day about an issue. And in a lot of places, I have to speak from New York because I don't know factually about other states. In New York, when they get a phone call about an issue, they have to track it. They have to keep track of what people are calling about. And in New York in particular, people on the Upper West Side are very efficient at getting things passed because they know how the system works and they'll take advantage of that. They'll call, they'll persist, they'll visit, they'll visit, they'll visit. Be a presence, be annoying. If anything, at the end of the day, politicians actually kind of appreciate it because when they first got into politics, they did the same thing. They knew they had to persist. They knew they had to be annoying. So it does garner a little bit of respect when you show that persistence. Come hell or high water, just tell yourself I'm gonna keep at this until. When I started my charity, and my focus was on lead poisoning, and it's still a major concern of ours in New York and abroad. Mind you, please, if you haven't been aware of lead poisoning, learn about your water. Please run your faucet for 30 seconds in the morning, or if it's been 8 hours, just for your own safety. But I sat down with legislative aid and wrote a bill in 2017, April of 2017, and it didn't get passed that year. The next year, I met with different politicians. It didn't get passed that year, so it died. And in my heart, I was like, oh, I failed. And you'll feel like you failed. It doesn't matter. You just keep trying. You get up, you keep trying. You get up, you keep trying. There's no reason to say it didn't work, so I give up now. Once you find it didn't work, ask yourself, what else can I try differently? Because you still care about that issue. So giving up isn't really an option, especially with something like sexual assault. So even though that bill died, the next year I went at it again and I met different politicians and they wrote the bill again and it finally got passed. It took me 3 years, but the bill got passed. And that's not to say it'll take you that long. If you have a team, it's a lot easier. I was flying solo. You have multiple people who are showing up, multiple people who are calling. It makes it a lot easier. If you band together with organizations, that's actually huge. So if you have every sexual violence prevention group in an area say we are a coalition and we care about this issue in this state, that forces the hand. I saw that with the Closed Rikers campaign that I helped work on with several other organizations. There were 70 different organizations, and they closed Rikers. That's something that at first blush didn't seem very likely. That's a very big prison in New York, if you're not aware with it. But it kind of robs people of due process, and people are held there indefinitely without bail, which is really violating a couple civil rights. But when you band together, you're stronger together. So persist and buddy up, I guess, would be the moral of my story on any cause that you care about.
So if I actually meant to see have it in front of me. Do you have the phone number to Senator Balaji's office or who they would call?
Yes,
front of you, or maybe we can put it in the comments. And
I'll type it in right now.
perfect.
And I'll write
Perfect.
his name too. Thank you so much.
We can all be calling.
Yeah, love it. Love it, love it, love it. Assembly member Carl Hasty. And I have a video posted on my Community for a Cause IG that also walks you through the calling process for anyone who misses the number. Call every day. Yeah, I'll call if I realize it's 2 o'clock, I haven't called yet, it's time to make a call. But it's usually a 1 minute call. Sometimes you get voicemail, and sometimes you get someone who's very tired of receiving phone calls, and you just say your name again and say, I just want to know, is it on the floor calendar yet? When is it going to be on the floor calendar? I want to see it on the floor calendar.
So thinking might be a nice hack if you set an alarm on your phone to remind you.
I love that.
So that with the lockdown, it's like, what day is today? What time it is? So maybe putting a reminder, so at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock every day. Oh, if numbers in the reminder, all you got to do is call. Take a couple of minutes and you're back to your day.
Right. And if you have a buddy, if you realize anyone on here who's watching, you're like, hey, myself, my girlfriend loves this, my cousin, my brother, whoever, you make it a buddy system. Ask them, hey, did you make a call today? Cool. And have them call you some days, hey, did you make a call? Yeah, I made my call. Just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. If they ask you where you live and you're out of state, let them know you have family in New York, because now I'm your family. So that counts. And that kind of adds the heat, because if they don't feel like, thank you for the love, I appreciate the love, they need to know that voters who can vote them out are concerned about it, and they have to keep track. So keep at it. Keep at it.
Make them accountable.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and getting more educated on this process. And I look forward to chatting with you further. And I will be calling every day. And look out for more reminders all to call as well. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you, Me Too Many Voices. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Take care, guys. Be safe out there.
Bye.